If you're out of the loop and getting back in the swing of things, harmonics is things that life very well may entail. And when you're in sleep, in a REM sleep, that deep sleep, that's emotion as well. And how much could be derived from this if it's at on equal ends is what a tuning fork does at best. And so within that harmonic state of a stable structure, you cannot leave out how much of a sound design things have. That's almost the same as an hourglass that were a Klein bottle and you couldn't tell just because the sand was moving gradually. Do you know how much time it would take for all the grains of dirt on Earth to get burned up if the sun was enveloping it? Not a whole bunch of time, but the important thing is that those grains of dirt would be moving at a pace that would look almost as though it was a giant hourglass. Perfect example of what fabrication is. This being one in the same crap on the ground, I pick it up. If at a collective it's taken for granted, but it's entirely different when in aerodynamics, weaponizing cells because playing with atoms can do that, as then proclaiming what came out of nature is a Frankenstein, is a tall tale sign, one of which that would give me a full head of steam because my blood is boiling. So this ant went up to the bee twitched. It's alive. It's alive. Why isn't it flying? Wings look like a fly's wings. That's off-putting. When a deer has crinkled ears, if it's a fawn, then it means it's dehydrated and lost. Where with this guy, his wings being kind of like a housefly would suggest, I don't know. What's wrong, man? Look at that. But it's the underlying factor that resonates with an embodiment. Because companies are considered themselves entities. And so you've got LGBTQ plus, where the plus at the end would entail anything beyond your wildest dreams to whatever your desire should so please. If you don't know how much value that has to it, it means anything that is displeasureful would go against your well-being. And so hate speech gets redefined immensely. And if you've got
a woke judge that's worse than a Satanist practicing black magic on Halloween in the center of the Bermuda Triangle. However corrupt that is, it can be decaled how unorthodox what a regular thing is. Such as when someone would say, my heart skips a beat with what you just got done saying. Where someone with an irregular heartbeat, it's called heart murmurs. It doesn't have a lub dub. It's like dub 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 lub dub. And so them saying their heart skipped a beat with what I just got done saying, on the realistic edge, where I actually have my heart skipping a beat, is how it performs regularly because its harmonics are irregular. The same argument, but it's just drastically fabricated for things that are hidden agendas.
It's like making a glockenspiel, but then missing a certain amount of keys and then calling it a tuning fork.
Or a glockenspiel.
And having that be exemplified for making like specific notes because you knew that the notes would make a specific ring because you've taken out a few keys in disguising a xylophone as a tuning fork.
Or a glockenspiel.
So dark and twisted things aren't bad, it's just how you handle them. So seeds, they germinate when they're kept underground in the dark, and the more that they can have an angular momentum, twisting, it would break the shell. And that's fantastic because they kind of corkscrew on an angle. They don't always go like straight up out. And then that ability can be seen like within Sleeping Beauty in the fictional book Uprooted. It would have the castle in Sleeping Beauty. I don't know what castle it is, but it has all these roots come up and the vines go over it, almost decaling a problem before it had happened. That's what a cadaver does. It's a person who dedicated their body to being tested on after they succumb to having their life end. How much of this would be a joke if at some odd reason everyone was considered a cadaver to the biggest person who was the most lifeless of anyone? Could as big as their pockets be, have as shallow as a soul to do that justice? We're at the bottom of a sea where a whole bunch of glowing sea anime, but the closer you got to it, they started moving in more and more desolate locations as opposed to being a collective. And so the closer you got, you noticed that it were just a whole bunch of tiny little speck like fireflies together. You get a little closer, it's just an entire group of angler fish. And so that would be scary if that were the entire ocean ridge, the floor bed. So it's the double standard, where it's not sea anime and then it's a whole bunch of angler fish posing as it, is one part. The second part is if it covered the entire ocean floor. That would be extremely daunting to animals who live on the smaller region of the floor closest to the very bottom, because the entire bottom would be lit up with all that, and it's supposed to be dark. So that would be like the third fixture of the 3 layering of bad news bears. How would I relate that to real life when people say you are what you eat, and then synchronicity and homogeneous? It would be like everything that you ate accounts for how healthy you are currently. That can and cannot be true. And then all the crap that you've ever sweated out, the dirtiest you've ever been, accumulates to, your body odor, all this collective. If that was all just defiant of like a really bad thing, such as like there's toxic barrels at the bottom of the ocean, it would be iconic to have electric eels swimming around that, because toxins and hazardous wastes are iconically radioactive, because that type of thing excites these chemical burns, and the chemical burns are highly conductive of radiation. And so like when you're zapping radiation around a thing like that is tumorous, it is going to excite it. So the eels swimming around barrels of toxins that are electric and getting jacked up from it is like a cartoon image, is kind of funny. There's another image. If there was a cartoon above this, would probably be the eels swimming around the toxins and electric, going everywhere. Probably those anglerfish at the bottom with the lit up seafloor bed. That would be like an opening scene. And then a pirate ship with a whole bunch of arms and legs dragging behind it. Almost like when in weddings you drag behind your car a whole bunch of cans and strings. That's what they did in the olden days. And it says just married. But what if these pirates were having a whole bunch of strings attached with arms and legs and ripped off body parts, and all these sharks, they were trying to like chum the ocean and excite all these sharks, and tangled in those things they were dragging was like this puppet, and then the puppet was actually like Pinocchio, and it was moving just because it's possessed. And in the world there's a lot of different like stories of dolls that move, and so this one would be nothing short of that. And so like this puppet, he would be like getting pulled by the ocean, so he'd be getting hit by these waves back and forth. So he just looked like a piece of trash that was getting carried along with all the limbs and everything. But then he would be tangled inside all of the stuff being dragged by strings, so he'd be like fumbling to get himself undone while getting dragged with all these body parts of things that were more real than him, even though he isn't real. These lost body parts and everything. And the ocean is like the opposite of what a phantom limb. So the body of the ocean is like, when you're surfing, people are always like, did you feel the ocean? And so this is as suggesting it being like a cardiovascular system with the muscles pumping when the waves are crashing. But if you have actual body parts that have been detached and are part of that ocean flow with the cardio together as a collective, and then you've got a puppet that in this cartoon is real, but more real than him because he can't get loose, and that he's got all these like limbs of people around him crashing with the ocean. So subjectively those are more real than him, ergo the opposite of a phantom limb. A phantom limb is like a body part that someone used to have but it got lost, but they feel the sensation of the limb still being there. So it would be a radical if all those people who had lost their limbs were just like ghosts, and they were haunting this puppet trying to get loose because he was part of the ocean and the system of the dragging of the pirate ship.